Hey everybody, Jeff Harmon, phototacopodcast.com. And in this tutorial, I'm going to try to show you the best way to be able to go through the embedded preview workflow process that Adobe added to Lightroom Classic back in 2018. It's been around for several years, but I think a lot of photographers don't know how to use it. So I wanted to put together this tutorial training that will teach you how to use that workflow process. To start off with, we're going to go through, there's like 4 sections of this tutorial, and some of it you can skip through. We're going to put some times onto the video so you can see where to skip to. The first section is going to be JPEG images inside the raw files. I have to share that because it's really important to understanding how this embedded preview workflow process works. The second section is going to be the actual import process itself. There's actually a preferences setting that we need to make sure is set right, and we need to make sure some drop downs and checkboxes are set correctly to do this. Then I'm going to run through in the third section a brief culling example, and this is the part of the video where you can do the culling however it is you like to do it. I'm going to explain a little bit about my process, and show you how to do it. But we have to do that because the fourth section is then building the previews after we've done that. So hopefully that is going to be something you're going to be excited for. So let's get started. Let's get into that first section. First section is going to be about raw files here. And if you aren't aware, there's JPEG images embedded inside your raw files. And various camera manufacturers do it different ways. But here's a raw file from a Canon CR2 Canon 80D camera. And you can go do this same thing yourself. If you go to exif.regex.info, you can upload your raw file and check out what the images are. And you might want to do that just to validate that your raw file supports these images. But here I have the Canon file, and it says right here, extracted full resolution 2.9 megabyte file. There is a JPEG that is exactly the same full resolution pixel dimensions as the raw file embedded inside of it. It's actually a 3 megabyte file. That's pretty big for a JPEG. And it is very representative of the image. And this is a preview of it. You can see right here, they said it's 8% of the width, right? It's not the full width of the image that's shown here. It's really small just for display purposes. But we're going to tell Lightroom that we want to use that image instead of having Lightroom waste a bunch of time, CPU, and memory on building its own preview for the image, at least until we're done doing the culling process. And then we do want those previews. You can also see we have this 160 by 120 18K file that is embedded inside that raw file. There's another spot in Lightroom where those are going to show up, and I'll try to remember to tell you where that is. It's not just Canon raw files. Here it is, the Fuji X-T3 as well. And again, full resolution 2.7 megabyte JPEG embedded inside the raw file. Now, these are not because I shot JPEG plus RAW when I shot this raw file. I shot only the raw file, and the camera, when it wrote the raw file out to the memory card, it also embedded inside that raw file these JPEG files. You can see also right here we have the 160 by 120 9K image that is there inside the raw file. Again, Lightroom can make use of those. All right, here we have another example, the Nikon D750. Now this one is not quite the same because you'll notice it doesn't say full resolution. It's 6016 by 4016. It's really close though. You'll notice right here, this is the actual resolution of the raw image, and it's just ever so slightly more than that. So it's good enough. The rule that Lightroom uses, what the developers at Adobe put into the product is, if it's at least 50% of the original resolution, then Lightroom can use this embedded preview workflow and just use the JPEGs inside the raw file if you follow the process. If, on the other hand, it does not have that, and let's go to an example there. This is from the Sony a7R III, and you'll notice 1616 by 1080. This is a really itty-bitty, tiny JPEG image. And I mean, good enough for some previews for sure, but Lightroom is going to compare that to the raw file and say, oh, this is not 50% of the original resolution, and therefore it won't use that. Even if you follow the process I'm about to go through, by default, it wouldn't use that. So what do you do if you want to use this image, this process, and speed up your import process? You just shoot JPEG plus RAW. If you do that, then Lightroom was going to be able to notice that there's a JPEG, the same name as your RAW file, sitting right next to your RAW file. And you can follow the same process, and Lightroom will use that. The term that Lightroom calls that is like a sidecar file, which is different from the .xmp sidecars. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. It's a little different thing, and I'll show you where it is that is part of the process. So that there are JPEGs inside RAW files. Every RAW file has JPEGs inside it. It's just whether or not they're high enough quality. Most of them are, but specifically Sony, Olympus, Panasonic, and Fuji cameras, you're going to want to check your RAW files by going to this website, upload them, and see what they are there, so you know if you need to shoot JPEG plus RAW for this to work. All right, with that, let's get into Lightroom Classic. This is Lightroom Classic 921, to be very, very specific, released here in April 2020, but it's been a part of Lightroom since 2018. So if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber, and you're using a version of Lightroom Classic that is, 2018 or newer, which most of you would be, then you have this capability built into the software. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that we go up here to the Edit menu and then down to Preferences. And there's a preference that we need to make sure we check off here. And I'm going to go to the General tab right there. And this is the preference that we care about. Replace embedded previews with standard previews during idle time. We want this checkbox disabled. We do not want it checked. And here's why. Think about this. What this is saying is the embedded previews, those JPEGs that are inside the RAW files, we're trying to get Lightroom to use those in the import process and the initial stages of the culling process. We don't want Lightroom to build previews yet. We want to get through doing all of that. So if this checkbox is checked, it's going to undo that effort. We're going through some very specific steps to use those embedded previews. And if you have this checked, Lightroom is going to ignore really what you're doing, and it's going to spend the CPU memory and time to go and build the previews, which we don't want. So that checkbox should be unchecked. None of the other preferences matter. And so now let's go through an import process. An example of an import process. I'm going to use some images that I took of my son's high school graduation. They're images that won't matter at all to you. They're very important to me, of course, but they don't matter to you. And that's because I don't want you to focus on the images here. They don't matter. It's the process that we're going through that matters. And I want to import, there's 589 images that I've selected from my hard drive that I'm going to bring into Lightroom. And that could take some time to build previews for sure. I don't want to show you the process, the normal process everyone goes through. I just want to show you how to do the embedded preview workflow process. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to drag and drop these images. Now I want to show you one example of something. If you've never done this before, if you are in anything except the library module in Lightroom, if you're not on that, if develop's highlighted or anything else, if you're in a different module and you try to do this drag and drop, it won't work. So I do that, and now you can see I got this little do not pass sign or not going to happen sign, whatever. This is not going to work. If I release, it doesn't do anything. Okay, so if you want it to work where you can drag and drop from a folder and have it launch the import, you got to be in the library module. And now when I do it, I get this plus icon instead. And when I release, now the import dialog box comes up. On the left-hand side, it automatically went to the folder location where I have my son's high school graduation photos. If you don't do the drag and drop and you're going to take them from your memory card, then you can just launch the import dialog and go find your images. Across the top here, you have several options that don't matter either, so I'm not going to go through them in this tutorial. That's not the focus. What we do need to go through is this file handling stuff over here. This is very critical to making this preview process work. And you have some options. Minimal is not an option you want. I don't even want to describe it. It's not worth spending any time on. So embedded and sidecar, this is the option you want to choose to do the embedded preview workflow process. Now sidecar, remember, I talked about there are some cameras that embed JPEGs that are too small for them to be used by Lightroom by default, the JPEGs inside the RAW. And a solution to that is to shoot JPEG plus RAW. This is where Lightroom is saying, I'm going to use either the embedded images if they're good enough, or if you shot JPEG plus RAW and you have a JPEG right next to it, I will use that sidecar JPEG as the preview as we're doing this. And it's not going to build any previews. as part of the import process. And that's what we want to ask Lightroom to do. So this is the checkbox you want. Standard is their previews that get built that are mainly used in like the develop module when you see the image full screen. The fit view. It's not zoomed in 1:1, 2:1. It's not going in at all. They're very good. You can totally build them later. We don't want Lightroom to spend any time on it right now. We want to use those embedded images because it makes the process much faster. And 1:1, of course, are the very highest quality previews that Lightroom can build and has to build for doing things like details, sharpening, noise reduction. If you're going to use that, you really have to zoom in at least to 1:1, maybe even 2:1. Depends entirely on your situation, and you definitely want those at some point, but not right now. We have 598 images. I don't want, or 589. I don't want to have Lightroom waste a bunch of time on all of these. I am only going to edit some of these, and I want to spend the time to build those previews only for those few images that make it through my culling process. So embedded in Sidecar, that is what you want. Then we have this build smart previews too, and we don't want that checked either. They're valuable, they're very useful. I don't want to go into details of what they are, how they're different. That's not what this tutorial is about. Just don't check it because we want this import process to be as fast as we possibly can, and we're going to build them at the end of the process for the images that survive our culling process. So those are the two settings that you need to make sure you've got. Nothing else really matters as you go through this process. With that, I am now ready to hit the import button down here in the lower right. And if I do that, after I do that, I'm going to show you, I'm going to go very quickly and pan up to the upper left because it has a status about the images. And we're going to take a look at what's going on there. So I'm going to hit the import button, and then I'm going to come up here to the upper left, and we have two operations in progress, right? They're importing the files at the current location, and they're fetching the initial previews. And you can see that first process was really fast. 589 images, boom, it's done. Almost before I could get up there to show you that it's happening. Now it's also doing this fetch initial previews process. That's taking those JPEGs that are embedded inside the raw files, and it's caching it off onto the hard drive. And it is doing that pretty fast, but we don't have to wait. We can go ahead and start using Lightroom ahead of time. It's not an intensive process. Therefore, this is very responsive. I can even scroll all the way to the bottom, and you can see the images here already. They have some thumbnails. Now, you might have noticed as I did that initially the preview that was shown was pretty blurry, not very sharp, and it improved over time. And that's because it was using, remember those smaller thumbnails that I showed you that are embedded inside the preview, the raw file? It was using that initially as it was doing it. It was also using that, if you'll remember, on the import dialog box, we had a thumbnail preview of all the images that we had there. That smaller thumbnail sized image inside the JPEG was being used at that point. And then right now it's extracting, that's what this process is doing. It's extracting those larger JPEG images and caching them off so that it can use it as I was doing it. But I don't have to wait. Like I said, I don't have to wait. Lightroom can be very responsive, especially if you just stick in the grid view, which is what we're in right now, where we have these thumbnails shown, in the grid view of the library module. Just stay there for a bit. In fact, and I'll show you in a second how you can get a single image to take up the whole screen here, like you get in the develop module. What you do not want to do is click on that develop module or hit the D key. As soon as you do that, if you applied a preset in import, then Lightroom's going to build previews. If you go into the develop and you make adjustments, then Lightroom's going to build previews. And we want to avoid that right now as much as we can. We want to use those JPEGs and make it fast. So your focus now turns after you've got the import going. And again, you don't have to wait for this to finish, which is almost is right now. You don't have to wait for that. You just start culling your images. And so I'm going to start doing that. I recommend a two-phased approach. Actually, it's kind of three-phase because you can do it in the import dialog box. If there's an image that is just like the thumbnail shows, it's like a totally black frame, a totally blown out frame, or subject matter that's just not what you wanted. You knew it was a test shot or whatever. You can just not import it. You can just uncheck the checkbox and not import it. So that would be maybe the first phase of culling your images. The second phase I recommend you do in this grid view of the library module, which should be the default when you come to library. It goes to the grid view. And I'll show you how to change it to a different view that is also very helpful. But now you can run through these images. Now I'm going to run through a process that I use. I like using the star rating system for my culling process, but you can use pick flags or color settings, whatever works for you, however you want to do your culling process. I also I recommend that you enable the caps lock key as one of the things, so that as you make the ratings and learn your keyboard shortcuts for the pick flags, you have P for pick, you have X for reject, which is hard to remember, but X for reject, R to something else, and U for unflag. So there's 3 statuses there. You can use the stars. That's the number 1 through 5 keys. Give it 5 stars. You hit the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You hit those keyboard keys, just that numeric number on your keypad, and it will give it that star rating. Or you can use the colors, which is actually 7 or 6 through 9 are the colors. 0 will reduce the stars to nothing. And so you can use any of those systems. I don't care which one it is. For me, I use the stars, and I use 1, 2, and 3 stars. For a 1 is an image I don't care about at all. It has very little value. I probably won't do anything with it. A 2 is there's potential, especially if there's more than one pose or image that is the same. I'll give them all a 2 so I can decide which of the 2s I'm going to keep. And a 3 is I definitely want to work on this image. And I want that so that I go as fast as possible through the culling process. And look, all of the imports images are already done. That finished a long time ago as I was just explaining my process, but I would normally be doing this action that I'm about to take in parallel while Lightroom is pulling out the images, because it has enough of an image I can make some comparisons. So let me run through, 30, 40 of these images. It's going to go fast just to give you an example about how I want to go through it. But again, this is the part of the process you can do however you want to do your culling. I'm going to use my keys. I have my fingers over the 1, 2, and 3 keys on my keyboard, and I have the caps lock enabled so that it will auto advance. And now I'm looking at between these 2 images. My idea was this might be a stock opportunity, and as a stock image goes, we have like this black that kind of ends the chairs. This makes it look like the chairs go on forever. So there, I see more potential in the second one. I'm going to give the first one a 1, and because I have caps lock down, it moved automatically to the next image. And then I'm going to give this one a 2. It's a stock potential, not something I'm really super concerned about editing, because this is my son's high school graduation. I really want to focus on the images he is in. Those are the images that I really wanted to have. I thought this might be another stock opportunity. I don't really like it. It's a 1. And then we have some students carrying the flag. Potential, but maybe not critical. My son is not in it. 2. All right. And 1. And this was just a test exposure. I remember that's a 1. We have the first group, but there's a camera guy. 1, 1, 1. I'm just going quickly through it. 1. And my son knows them. They're kind of not turned. I'm going to go, okay, yeah, that's the best of the images. I just used my arrow key to move forward. I'm going to give that a 2. There's potential. 1, 1. No, my son doesn't know them. I was practicing shots. 1s. Okay, 1, 1. There's the first shot of my son up on the stage with his classmates. He was a student body officer. And so this is a decent one, but is there a better one? Yes, the next one. I just used the arrow key to move it forward so I could see, because I thought I probably had a better one. But I'm going to give that one a 1. I'm going to give that one a 2. That one a 1. And then actually he's looking at me here. So I'm going to give it a 2, because between this one and this one, there's potential. And look how fast I can move through this. It's very performant. And even if Lightroom is in the middle of pulling those initial previews out, this still works. So 1, 1. Oh, wait, this one, I did think maybe some stock potential showing the crowd, or my son might be interested. I'm going to give that one a 2, actually. 1, 1. Okay. Yeah, I'll give that one a 2. My son knew them. There's the administration doing flag ceremony. I'm just going to give it a 1, 1, 1, 1. You can see how I can just make a determination really, really fast as I'm going through this. All right, so looking at the program, yeah, that one I kind of like, and I like the wide angle too. I don't care about that one. Oh, I kind of like that one. More stock potential here, so I'm just giving them both 2. And then my son walking to the stage to give his speech. I don't really care. I'm going to give it a 1. Here he is, a full environmental shot giving a speech. I'll do it a 2. And then we have a few of the same ones here, and I could quickly kind of determine. There's another view, and I'm not going to go through it in this tutorial. Survey mode is another way you can really kind of use this to tell between different images if you like which ones you like the best. But I kind of like I like this one the best. I'm going to give it a 2, and the rest of them 1s. And then between this one, I like that one the best. So 1, 1, 2. All right, we're through 55 images. You get the idea of what it is that we're done. That's my second phase of culling. Now my third phase, I need to start making some decisions. I marked some of these images where there were multiples of them and I need to decide between them. So let's say I had gone through all of them. At this point, then, what I would do is I now want to tell Lightroom that I only want to see 2 stars and above because I used the star rating system to cull my images. I want to see the images I thought were pretty good. 1 stars were the ones that I totally want to ignore, but 2 star and above are that's the things that had potential in my images. So I just clicked on this and got 2 stars. The greater than or equal means it's going to be is greater than or equal to 2 stars. All right, so with that, I now have the images that I marked. You can see there's 16 images shown in the film strip now. That's all that's there. But I haven't had Lightroom build a single preview so far. It's only used the JPEG images that are embedded inside the raw file. All right, now the last step, I want to see these images bigger. I made some early decisions on the thumbnails, but now I need to see a little bit more detail to be able to see this. So you can either come down here and down in this corner, the lower left of the library module, this is the grid view. That's the default we've been in, and it looks like a grid, and it has that keyword, in parentheses, you see the G right there. So if any point, no matter where you are in Lightroom, if you hit the G key, it's going to go to the library module, and it's going to show you the grid view. Well, right next to it is something called loop view. And there's the E in parentheses. That's the keyboard shortcut to get to it. It's E. At any point in Lightroom, if you're using Lightroom, you can hit the E key and get to the loop view of the library module. Well, what does loop view do? Let's hit the E key right here. It makes it so that that image takes the full screen, and I can get a better idea about what the potential is. Where's the focus? I don't want to take a lot about the exposure from this because there's so much that we can do with exposure inside of Lightroom when we're done. But then also notice down here in the lower right, we have this embedded preview is showing right there. That's telling me, it's a visual indicator. The Lightroom Classic is saying, I'm using the JPEG that was embedded inside the RAW file, or for those cameras that don't have good JPEGs inside the RAW, your sidecar JPEG file that you shot JPEG plus RAW. I'm using that to show you this. And that's just so that you can make sure you know, like if you applied a preset during import, it wouldn't be showing up yet, because that is in the develop module. That requires previews to be built. So if you applied a preset and you're using this process, you can totally do the preset. You just don't want to go to the develop module, and you won't see the effects of that preset yet. It'll happen automatically in just a minute, but not yet. Okay, so it's really good, but look how fast you can go between images too. I can move between the images super quickly. All of them are showing the embedded preview, and I have not had Lightroom build a single preview yet. This is a very good way to be able to do this. So let's go through this. Now, here's a good example about something that I wouldn't have known from the thumbnails. I thought there was potential I'd care about this with them bringing the flag forward as the beginning of the graduation. But now that I look at it, I can tell the background is far sharper than the foreground. I missed focus. I didn't do this intentionally. If I did, then maybe it would still be fine. But I missed focus, which means I'm not interested in this image. Now I'm going to take caps lock off because I don't want anything to auto advance at this point, which would still be the case if I left caps lock on. But I want to change the rating of this image. I thought it was a 2 when I saw the thumbnails, but now that I see it in loop view and using the JPEG embedded image inside the RAW file, I can tell not an image I'm interested in. I want to change it to a 1, so I'm just going to hit the 1 key. I'm still in the library module, and you'll notice it disappeared down here. I don't have that image anymore between these two. It's gone because I told Lightroom to filter the film strip to only show the images that have at least 2 stars. So I turned that off. Okay, perfect. So now we're ready to keep going. This one looks like the focus might be off too, a little soft. I really don't like it, so I'm going to give it a 1 as well. These 2 images, so I have 2 of the same, and I can just go back and forth between the 2 now. There's other modes too, like I mentioned, survey mode, there's comparison mode. There's other ways to do this, but it's fast enough just to do it this way, and I don't have to hit any other keys. And I like the one where he's looking at me better than the one where he doesn't. Plus, the girl, it's hard. Neither one of these is perfect. I'm going to leave both at 2 for right now. and now, but you can see the kind of the process and what's going on. I would go through all of the images. In fact, let's go through one more example. I had this idea, this concept of kind of a full cap and gown image that could be maybe a stock. And actually this one is not even possible. This one has faces that are too recognizable. That one is out. So I'm going to just hit 1 on that and get rid of it. But I got these two. And again, I could use compare view or survey mode to see. But between these two, this one has more recognizable faces. I could crop them. And I'm still going to have to probably crop on the other image. But this one, of the two, between this one is not as good. So I'm going to hit 1 just to get rid of it. And now I have just the one image where I thought that might be a good stock photo. Okay, so I've narrowed it down. I had 15. I did more culling, the third phase of culling. I'm down to 12. Now the last phase of this whole embedded preview workflow process. Make sure you don't go in the develop module. Remember, that's really important, or else Lightroom's going to start building previews, which isn't necessarily bad. And if you really want to go develop a photo, you can. But just know it's going to be slower initially when you go hit the develop module. But now that I'm here, now's the point where I know I'm going to edit these photos. I know I'm going to need those previews built. So I can just press Control-A on Windows, Command-A on Mac. So I select them all. And then I can go up here to the library menu, and I'm going to go down to previews and then over to, and I have my choice. I can build those standard sized previews we talked about, which are kind of the view I'm in right now in loop view. It would build the preview for that, or in the develop module where it looks the same, where it takes up the whole screen, one image, the fit view. Or I could build one-to-one previews, or I can build smart previews. So I'm going to show you building one-to-one previews because I know I'm going to want those as I'm going to do it. If you use presets and you want to see it on the full image here, you might want to build the standard size previews. In fact, I'll do that just so you can see the length of time that it's going to take to do this, because you kind of want both of these, which is not an option when you're in the import dialog. So I'm going to click this, and then we're going to come up here so you can see how it is. And yeah, to build the standard previews did not take much time. It might take a little longer if you did apply a preset, because it's got a little bit of work to do in addition to it, but it built those, and it built them really fast. For 12 images, it's not bad. I can go down to library, previews, and build one-to-one previews now. And let's see how long that takes. A little bit slower, not quite as fast to do that, and building the one-to-one previews. But this is totally doable when I have it down to just a few of the images from the shoot that I'm going to use. Instead of having Lightroom build all of these previews, and I'm never going to use them on the images that don't survive my culling process, it doesn't make sense to waste time on that. And the library module facilitates a thought process too. It's really important that getting through culling goes so much faster when you do that. So now the one-to-one are done. Now I'll go to previews, and I'm going to build the smart previews just so you can see the speed of that. And for 12 images, it goes really fast to build the smart previews. And now I have the previews all fully built for those files, and I can go into the develop module. And as I click on an image, it goes really fast between images. And this is now a rendered version. As you make adjustments, of course, the previews have to be updated, and it will do that work for you. But even something like if I wanted to zoom in a little bit, that zoom happens really, really fast. It's totally ready to be able to do that. It makes it so that your develop experience is much, much faster, and you're all ready to go. We need the previews, but we only need them at the right point in time. So that's the whole point of the embedded preview workflow process, is making it so that you can go and do the import process really quickly, get through your culling, and then build your previews. Hope you liked the video. I hope this helped. If you did, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel as I put out more training tutorial videos like this. And I'm working on a full-blown, all explained, everything in detail Lightroom training course that you can go and buy. I'm working on that. It's going to be coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. I'd love to have you check out my podcast. That's phototacopodcast.com to be able to get like audio tips. I do a weekly or monthly show on that, and then a weekly show called Master Photography Podcast that you can go and check out and be able to get like weekly news, tips, tricks, things like that. So thanks everyone for joining me. I hope it helped, and get out there and shoot.